I've played 6 hours of Assassin's Creed Shadows and interviewed the game directors at Ubisoft Quebec studios, but the real question is it any good and is it worth your time? So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what I did during this 67 hours of game time, talk to you about what I liked about the game, as well as go into detail about some of my concerns, which there are several. But let me be transparent straight out of the gate with you here, because on the whole, as a long-time AC fan who's also made over 300 AC videos on YouTube, I genuinely enjoyed the game, especially stealth and parkour mechanics, which I feel have been significantly improved, and we will get to all of that very shortly. But just so you don't feel bamboozled, there's a couple of very important disclosures you need to know. First of all, I have not been paid by Ubisoft to make this video, nor is this video sponsored by anyone else. I am making this video for you in the genuine hope that you get a clearer understanding on what this game is all about, so you feel informed enough to be able to make up your own mind whether it's worth your time, attention, and your own money. Now, how did this event all come together? How did it work and what was involved? Well, we arrived at Ubisoft Quebec studios, we checked in, and then we had a very small welcome presentation from Jonathan Dumont, the creative director. And then after that, we then headed straight to our gaming stations to jump into the Animus and of course Shadows. Now, spec-wise, I played Shadows on a PC at 4K 60 FPS, where the session was broken up into 3 specific game saves for us to experience. Now, the first was the Prologue, which took around 45 minutes or so, which introduced us to both Naoe and Yasuke, establishing both of their storylines, followed by our second session, where we completed one main quest line called the Noble, which is 1 out of an available 12 black box missions that we can experience in Shadows, which I will of course walk you through shortly as well. Now, this session was approximately around 4 to 5 hours long, where we could also explore the open world if we had time. And for our third and final session, I spent 45 minutes getting to grips inside the new Assassin Hideout mechanic, which is kind of like Assassin's Creed, but of The Sims, or a version of The Sims where you can also summon an army of cats, which I know a lot of you are going to like. Now, first, visual impressions. I thought it was pretty excellent, to be honest with you. I didn't come across any bugs or game-breaking issues in my 6+ hours with the game, and for comparison, when I played an isolated playtest of Assassin's Creed Mirage at Ubisoft Bordeaux Studios in 2023, it was bug city, and that turned out to be pretty buttery smooth at launch. So even though this preview is not the whole game, it does seem to be in a pretty positive condition, so take that as you will. Now, speaking of which, when I did start the prologue, one of the first things I noticed was the quality improvement of the cutscenes compared to Valhalla, or most recently Mirage. In fact, Akeem Milne, Quebec's Associate Director of Cinematic Design, told me the team have spent a considerable amount of time over the last 4 years creating new animations for social dialogue in-game that are representative of the hierarchical social structure in Japan, which means that certain NPCs won't look other NPCs in the eye if they belong to a higher social class, which you'll now notice subtly in cutscenes, which is pretty cool. That said, even with these new animations that do appear in cutscenes that have also been edited in a way that's similar to Japanese cinema, those infamous flappy mouths reappear here in this AC game, where the voice occasionally doesn't match up with the lip movements. And I'm going to throw a couple of examples at you here just to kind of show you what I mean.
Your black man has the instincts of a warrior, as he realized the danger you are in.
Now, these cutscenes are during the prologue, where we arrive in Osaka and accompany the Portuguese Jesuits to meet Oda Nobunaga, where he recruits Yasuke as his retainer. This is when we then get a flash-forwarded memory to years later of Oda attacking the Iga province, which we also saw occur back in that cinematic trailer last year. And it's at this point where I got my first gameplay experience with Yasuke, and to be brutally honest here, it felt incredibly familiar to hacking and slashing as Eivor in Valhalla, and that's because the mechanics are pretty much the same. You parry enemies when there's an incoming blue or white attack to open up the enemy for a counter-attack, and you move or dodge out of the way when there's a unstoppable red kind of attack inbound. You can also hold the R2 or RT button to initiate your special abilities that you then spend via combo points on the left-hand side corner of your screen, and that's pretty much it for Yasuke, apart from his new posture system, which you can activate by just holding the light or heavy attack button for as long as you want. And when you see an opening in the enemy's movements, you can then release it to inflict more damage to them. But in all honesty, I didn't really use it at all throughout my whole playthrough, because it was just easier to button bash, parry, and spend his abilities for extra damage when I could. That said, one combat change I did like was when you initiate these special abilities, you don't actually become immune to damage until the animation finishes, which means that you can actually die during these locked animation special ability segments, which has a little bit of risk to it. It also doesn't automatically lock on to enemies in the vicinity when you do trigger a special move, so you can actually miss enemies entirely and just waste combo points in the process. So to stop this from happening, you need to either lock on to enemies with a click of your R3 stick on your controller, or manually turn or aim Yasuke at them before triggering that ability, which makes combat more challenging in my opinion. I think that is a good change. And whilst we're in combat, I also thought that the awareness of the enemy AI was positive and improved from Valhalla and Mirage, where they kind of just don't stand and queue up to hit you like the old and even recent AC games. But that said, this was a contrasting experience right at the start of the game compared to what I experienced later on in the open world, where several enemies were kind of clumping together and they refused to follow me up onto a small building where I had gone out of line of sight, and they were just then waiting below, not resetting that stealth loop or going back to their guard station. So clearly more work needs to be done on the enemy AI here. Now, after defeating the fort leader, Yasuke's prologue finishes, and then we begin Naoe's prologue, but from her perspective, where she was on a mission outside of the same fortress that Yasuke was just storming. But first impressions from me as playing as her were very positive. In fact, I was initially a little bit kind of taken aback by how quick she is in game with her movements compared to other recent AC protagonists, and it almost felt like it was too fast, but I'm very kind of pleased to say to you that I did acclimatise to the speed quickly. I'm sure you will as well, which was predominantly due to how well her parkour and movement animations melted together back to back when you were just running around, because it didn't really matter what parkour route I chose in game. The game then responded instantaneously and produced the most appropriate non-sluggish animation that best fit the specific object that I was trying to vault over or jump across, and it just felt very, very smooth. This is also where we got our first taste of going prone in an Assassin's Creed game for the first time, and I'm a very big fan of it, especially when you whistle an enemy over to your location and then you kind of roll out, you assassinate them, and then you roll back into being prone in the bush. I honestly cannot believe it hasn't been in an AC game before, because it just makes sense, especially as the stealth detection by enemies is pretty solid in this game, meaning you won't get spotted if your big toe or foot is like poking slightly out of a bush, like we saw repeatedly in Valhalla. That said, my criticisms of stealth in Valhalla aside, it's not a video about that. One thing I will say about meeting all of the developers in Quebec is that they were genuinely passionate and excited to show off their game when we arrived. That really came through to all of the press and all of us who were there, especially these parkour and stealth mechanics, where it became very clear to myself that they do give a shit and want genuine constructive feedback to make it much better for players to enjoy. And in that regard, to spur on this feedback, Ubisoft have actually given me 3 AC Shadow game codes to give away to you. You just need to be a subscriber of this channel, and you also need to share your positive or negative opinions on what you think so far about Shadows below in the comments, as the directors of the game genuinely read the YouTube comments of these previews. They've told me firsthand, and yeah, I'll be announcing the winner on launch day with multiple comments of yours counting. So share your thoughts after this video, and very best of luck to you. Now, after Naoe's prologue ended, we ported into this second session where we were allowed to choose who we wanted to play as. And of course, I chose Naoe, as I wanted to test out the stealth mechanics in further detail, and more on that in just a minute, because while I'm on the topic, you can switch between characters anytime you want from the menus, even if you're midway through a quest, which means that you can start it with Yasuke and then finish it with Naoe, but it's not without its faults. And to give you an example of this, I started a quest with Yasuke, switched midway through to Naoe, and then spent around 20 minutes or so meticulously scaling a fortified castle in stealth, purposefully avoiding enemies. I then reached the quest target at the top of the castle, where I then entered a cutscene to then see Yasuke just kind of like waltzing in the room beside me alongside Naoe, like he just kind of backflipped himself up the castle walls, which he can't do, by the way, as his parkour is very limited. In fact, if you try to parkour with him, he'll just boink his head against the low rising wall when you try to get him to climb up something. It's ridiculous.
That was not ideal.
Anyway, I raised this issue with the dev team, who told me that they're working on continuity improvements, and they've already added in small comments or references in these type of unique scenes to breach this juxtaposition issue, and I'll give you an example of what they mean here.
I've taken care of his hidden shinobi. Did his samurai prove troublesome?
Nothing I could not handle.
Now, as for this black box quest though, it was called The Noble, and we were tasked with investigating the behind-the-scenes dealings of a local lord who appeared to be undermining the region by plotting various different high-profile assassinations. Now, I won't go into detail on the story aspect of this quest, for spoilers of course, but the goal here is utilizing the new objective board in the menu, and that's to use or follow several leads in this region and investigate clues that provide us with confirmation on who our target is. Now, this is a similar mechanic to what we've recently seen in Mirage, but where it differs in Shadows is the utilization of scouts, which is a new mechanic that when used can instantly display your quest target or the location of your objective on a map instead of just like manually trying to find a clue in a large blue area or circle, which does take time to do in game, as well as using these scouts as a kind of resource to reset your wanted level in that province, which happens if a guard rings the alarm bell whilst you're in an enemy base. Now, after we've finished all of these small side quests resulting in the identity of our main target, we were then able to begin this black box mission with Akeem confirming to me that they are not replayable, by the way, which I was pretty gutted about, which means just like in Mirage, if you want to replay these handcrafted assassination missions where you can take different routes and kill the target in various different ways, you need to create a manual save in your game when you see the "we are ready" dialogue option, as you can see here on your screen, before beginning this final black box mission quest. In fact, I suggested to the game directors that these missions need to be replayable in some sort of Animus memory menu, similar in format to the old school AC games, which is an idea they liked, so hopefully these replayable features gets added in a future update. Now, as you progress through this black box mission, there will be different progress stages where you're given the option to switch between characters as they reconvene together for a quick chat, as you can kind of see here on your screen. The thing is though, once you confirm your choice of character, you're then locked in and you can't reload a save to then change your mind without losing all of your progress in that black box mission. Now, I did find this a bit frustrating because I chose Yasuke for one of these stages where, in hindsight, I should have chosen Naoe, because this meant that I needed to run up 35 flights of stairs inside the castle, smashing down doors and climbing up more ladders, which took around 15 minutes. Whereas if I had chosen Naoe, I could have had it done in about 5 minutes by scaling up the castle walls like an absolute ninja. That said, after getting to the next team checkpoint for another chat, I switched back to Naoe, and this is where I really got to experience the new lighting and shadow system and how it's become a core mechanic of stealth in this game, which in my opinion, I think this is the very best implementation to an Assassin's Creed game that I can honestly remember in recent memory, and I do not say that lightly. So I'm going to run you through an example of how this actually works, because in this same black box mission, I ended up being discovered by an enemy NPC. So to try and reset the search party by not having to climb all the way back down the castle, I tried to reset the stealth loop by hiding out of line of sight behind these nearby walls, which I wasn't doing very well, and of course this didn't work. And then it kind of dawned on me, I don't need to do this kind of nonsense anymore in an AC game. I just need to walk into an area where there's no light in it, and then I can just disappear into the shadows. Which was such a aha moment, or kind of felt like I was exploiting a bug or cheating, because you're in stealth, but you're also standing in the middle of a courtyard, and because of that, my brain took a second to figure out that this was it's intended, because this has always meant instant detection in other AC games, and this is where I then started seeing the stealth mechanic entirely differently in Shadows, like I was playing an Assassin's Creed game for the first time, where the best analogy I can kind of think of here off the top of the dome, which sounds pretty ridiculous, but essentially imagine yourself as a Japanese vampire ninja where light beams are kind of cutting along the courtyard and it's super bad and you don't want to go into the light because you'll just explode and die, and that means death. And that's the kind of appropriate analogy I could kind of think of here, and that's why it was so enjoyable, because even though Yasuke can also hide in the shadows, he's about 20 foot tall and he's obviously not as effective or mobile as Naoe, and he also makes a lot of noise, by the way, because his armor clinks and clanks, and enemies are alerted to that as well. That actually plays a factor in this game as well. Noise impacts, where the enemies are or where they try to find you. And in fact, the only reason why I'd actually play as Yasuke is because of his defensive absorption and his hard-hitting weapons, where it's quite easy just to steamroll or nuke a group of NPCs quite quickly. Everything else gameplay-wise is just easier and way more enjoyable to do with Naoe, in my opinion. I even unlocked a melee ability for her in the mastery skill tree, where she just dodges all offensive attacks for 20 seconds. It's kind of like Neo out of the Matrix, which allow me to destroy the boss very quickly. So unless you want the hack and slash big boy experience, Naoe is the character to choose for sure, in my opinion. Now, what about this new hideout mechanic? Well, it's going to unlock around 5 or so hours into the main storyline and provide you with a customizable area where you can cash in resources gathered by looting enemy camps in the open world, which you can then use to construct buildings like the dojo, with this building being a training facility where you can upgrade your allies that you have recruited via their own unique quest lines that you've then found out in the open world in different provinces. And once you do recruit them, they become available to use in combat, where all 5 of them have unique abilities that can help you or complement your own gameplay in some way. In fact, this was perhaps the most fun I had inside the game alongside stealth, where as Naoe, I called my assassin ally to eliminate patrolling targets, just like you used to be able to do in Brotherhood, which was so satisfying to see in a new or recent AC game. I also tried the other ally available in our playtest called Yaya, who is a tank ally, and she charges into enemies as a distraction, so you can kind of just sit back and just ping the other enemies off one by one, which was again very satisfying to do. You can also change their outfits in their own menu screen for a little bit of customization preference, which is a nice touch, alongside the transmog option being available for your own character, whether that's Naoe or Yasuke, in the customization menu, in the inventory menu, and back in your hideout as well. Now, as for other gameplay perks, there's a variety of other buildings which offer nice bonuses for you in game, which I will break down in its entirety in another video for you very soon, as there's a substantial amount of info to get through here. Because what makes this whole hideout mechanic enjoyable is that you can specifically choose where you want to place your building to be constructed, only if it's inside this blue building zone, where you can then connect these buildings together and then even build corridors between them to make it unique to you. You can also lock building cosmetics in the world and change the look of the tiling or roof textures, as well as place armor sets and weapons on display stands throughout your hideout like the old games, and even hanging up artwork, paintings, or valuables that you've also collected throughout the game, and just sling them on your walls as well, which I think is quite nice. Most importantly though, when you do pet animals or paint them whilst out and exploring, they are then unlocked and then can be added or dropped into your hideout, as you can see me do here. So if you want an army of kittens patrolling your shinobi base of operations, then it can be done. Now this is of course good fun, but my concern here is that the hideout did feel quite empty, where I was informed that more NPCs will arrive and visit and live in your hideout as the game progresses, which will contribute to that immersive feeling of a bustling village that you founded yourself. I'm also tentative about the amount that it costs to construct these buildings and then upgrade them in game. So I can foresee a little bit of bloated grind here to get this settlement to the max level of 9 by refreshing the seasons on the map to then farm resources at different castles and bandit camps. Now, with that all said, what's been shown so far, in my opinion, is largely positive, and I felt like I wanted to play more after my session ended, which I feel is always just a genuinely good indicator, or a good feeling with these types of things, just on a fundamental level. Was it fun? Was it enjoyable? Yes. Was there things that could be better? Of course. But did I want to play more? The answer is yes, and I think that's because of the improved detail in the cutscenes, the dynamic lighting for stealth, and the hideout customization are great additions to this franchise. They're trying new things here, especially if they continue to improve on them as time goes on. I think this is going to be a really good thing for Assassin's Creed. Even so, I feel like Yasuke is just kind of pointless in this game, apart from the occasional time that you need him for some large mob clearance, or you enjoy his brutal animation finishes, which can also actually be turned off in the settings. And as I just mentioned, I also have concerns about the lack of NPCs engaging in their own lives and routines in this game, and if we combine that with the lack of replayability at this stage after finishing the game, where we can't even redo stealth black box missions if we don't have the save file, or if we then forget to save before we actually jump into that mission, it means that we're then waiting for DLC content and future updates to play this game after we 100% it, which it's then just going to be completely uninstalled until the next thing comes along. long. However, they may add this replayability mechanic into the brand new Animus hub, which, as it so happens, I also managed to get a sneaky first look at in a private presentation in Quebec. And to find out more, I would say click this video on your screen right now, but do remember to leave your own comments below to enter the giveaway, and hopefully I'll see you there in just a second. Thanks to Nika for helping me source this video, and my additional thanks to Sylvia at the UK team and all the amazing developers working at Ubisoft who were very kind and very welcoming and very patient. And of course, as usual, coffee is on me.